toy fans, welcome back to the Spectre Creative Channel. I'm your host, Scott Toy Guru Neitlich. It's a name I gave myself, but it's stuck. What can I say? I've worked in the toy industry for quite a few decades, and I've collected toys for a few decades more. And I want to talk about a lot of the buzz going around about Hasbro and other toy companies sublicensing out their product lines. Now, a lot of people are looking at this and going, what the heck is going on? Why would a toy company not want to make toys anymore? But see, the thing is, this has been happening for a long time, longer than I think people realize. And I want to put a spotlight on that and kind of look at what's happening in the industry as a trend. So I've already made a few videos talking about why companies like Hasbro would want to get out of the toy making process because, well, Hasbro owns a lot of IP. Everything from G.I. Joe to My Little Pony to Dungeons and Dragons, Magic, they own a lot more than most toy companies. I mean, Mattel has Hot Wheels and Barbie and Polly Pocket and Max Steel, but outside of Barbie and Hot Wheels, those are kind of the big ones. Hasbro has sort of like 10 household name brands, Monopoly. Mattel has 2, just as a comparison, not, a judgment on either company. So in the past 2 decades, there has been a big shift in the toy industry from creating your own IP, like Transformers, He-Man, etc., to licensing. And a big part of this, it's the same kind of reason that we keep seeing the same movies made over and over again, more Ghostbuster movies, more Star Wars movies, more Jurassic Park movies, because it's much easier to bet or take a chance on a safe bet than to strap yourself to a rocket and hope it works. Most toy lines do not sell. In fact, only about 20% of product that's designed and put out there becomes a big hit and actually has a lifespan over 1 year. Most toys have a 6-month lifespan on shelf. Just look at the last Indiana Jones movie. Barely lasted 6 months. All right, and that was obviously because the content didn't work. Not that the toys weren't awesome. I want more. All right. So Hasbro owning so much IP, it makes sense that they want to look at becoming more like Disney or Universal, where they just license out their product to other toy makers. And a lot of the smaller companies, so outside of Mattel and Hasbro, and maybe Spin, are set up for very specific tasks within the toy industry. So whereas Mattel and Hasbro, what they bring to the table is mass distribution. They're able to distribute product wider and faster than any other company. And Mattel has some core competencies in dolls and die-cast cars. Mattel has some core competencies in blasters, action figures, and games. But core competencies can be learned. They can be changed around. After all, Hasbro never had the core competency of doing dolls, and then they got the Disney Princess license a few years back and built that capacity. So that's a whole other issue. So other companies, like let's look at Jack Specific, they specifically were set up to acquire the brands that Mattel and Hasbro pass on, if you will. So look at, like, when I was there, some of the brands I was working on were like Slug Terrier and what was the God, I'm totally drawing a blank. I can't think of it. I'll think of it in a minute. But it's World of Warcraft. There it is. World of Warcraft, perfect example. For Jax, that was an A+ line. I mean, at least internally before we launched it. For the toy industry and for movie studios, it was kind of like a C, B-list property, as opposed to like Star Wars or Avengers, which is an A-level property that they know. Hopefully, Star Wars hasn't been performing, but ideally from past, those brands were called evergreen. Something like World of Warcraft, I'm talking about the movie, the one that did really well in China. It was a brand new line of toys, and it wasn't considered A-list the way Star Wars or, Batman, Marvel is. So big companies like Hasbro, Mattel passed on it. And smaller companies like Jax literally exist to pick up those licenses. I'm not saying they're the scraps from Mattel's table, but they're the brands that they feel there is financial upside to the brand, but it's maybe even too small for a company like Hasbro and Mattel. On the other hand, companies like Big Fun down in Florida, They exist to license IP from toy companies, which is what we're talking about. So, like, look at this end cap here at Target. It's all practically Big Fun product. It's all brands that are owned by other toy companies. Light Bright, My Little Pony, Rock'em Sock'em. These are brands that Big Fun has sublicensed or licensed from a toy company like Mattel and Hasbro. They've been doing this for years. Like, they sublicense from Mattel, Fisher-Price, and do the sort of vintage Fisher-Price figures that look more like, well, like the Pinmates or the original ones, except they're thicker and bigger. We'll get into that's a whole other video about the safety issues with old Fisher-Price toys and the myth of that, because they wound up on the cover of a book. Anyway, that's another YouTube video, which I'll link at the end of this. The point being is that this is not uncommon, and it's been happening for years, that what they call, vintage established brands that are not currently at market are picked up by companies like Big Fun. Big Fun was literally set up to do this, just like Jax was set up to pick up kind of the B and C list licenses that Mattel and Hasbro pass on and use their core competency of role play as a way of getting that. So it's nothing new for toy companies to be doing this. It's just that it's happening more and more. And the reason being is it's twofold. One, it's expensive. The cost of producing figures is, well, I mean, we know from how much we pay for them, right? Figures that used to be $7.99 20 years ago are now $25. That's a big, big jump in 20 years. I can't think of anything else that's gone up that much except maybe grapefruit and anything you buy at the local food line, but that's local inflation. So, phone's ringing. Nope, don't need to pick that up. All right. So, I know I should probably turn my ringer off when I'm recording these, but what can I say? I'm a lazy man. Companies picking up other licensing brands from toy companies is nothing new. What's new is these big companies like Hasbro and Mattel now saying, we're done. But, I lost my train of thought. So it was those two things. It was the expense and it's the content. The content is just like nosediving. Where we used to be in, Iron Man 1, Thor 1, Captain America 1, all the way leading up to Avengers 1, did really, really well. The Star Wars prequels did well. The Star Wars sequels did not. Current Marvel is not selling the way Marvel used to sell even 10 years ago. So when you have IP that if you have a contract, like let's say Hasbro has with Star Wars, they are contractually obligated to make certain figures. That's why we get things like figures from Acolyte and from Skeleton Crew that are coming out before they've even established a fan base. Like, we don't even know if anyone's going to like Skeleton Crew. They probably will. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But when you have product out for content that isn't proven, that's usually because you're contractually obligated. And I think Hasbro is sitting there after several years of these contractually obligated movies that they have had to produce product for. And yes, go to Ollie's and you'll know what I'm talking about. It's the fact that, it's the Black Panther 2 and the Eternals that are, and I mean, you can still find Rey figures from episode 8 hanging at Ollie's, and it's been like almost 10 years. So yeah, there's only so much of this a toy company can take. But their IP, Light Bright, Mr. Potato Head, My Little Pony, all of this stuff becomes more valuable as company capital. And so that's why we're seeing this trend. So it's not a new trend. It's just picking up speed. And I think the biggest thing is a lot of people don't realize the toys they're already buying. Monopoly hasn't been made by Hasbro in years. Okay, they do make some Monopolies, but not all of them. They've been licensing it out, especially the themed Monopoly sets, the ones that are based on IP. For years, they've been outsourcing that. Like USAopoly. So we're going to see more and more of this, is really what we're going to see. The question is, a lot of the brands are with these companies they're locked into contracts, like, Marvel with Hasbro through 2026. After that, it's really going to be interesting to see as new companies take these over, not just the toy companies' heritage brands they own, but these contracts that big companies won't want to renew. Is Hasbro really going to want to stay with Marvel and Star Wars with all of the the content that hasn't pushed toy product in the last few years? So I guess we will see, but it's definitely an exciting time to be a collector, because When smaller toy companies make stuff, it's usually better quality because they don't have the high overhead. I'm gonna make a whole video about how overhead affects toys, but go check out some of the big fun stuff. I think you'll be amazed at the quality. Believe me, they didn't pay me to put this. This is just from my own personal experience. When a third party is making something, they can put so many resources into it because for a brand, like Pound Puppies, isn't a huge brand for Hasbro right now to be tackling, but for a licensor who has Pound Puppies, it can become like their biggest brand, and they can put so much into it. So that's why this isn't necessarily a bad thing that we're seeing more and more toy companies become licensors and more smaller companies stepping up. And again, just like Super 7 and Loyal Subjects are in the same category as Big Fun. They're picking up all these collector lines that big companies, Mask going to Loyal Subjects, perfect example. So don't fear this. It's honestly, I think, a good thing, and we're going to get more and better toys as the previous companies that were toy manufacturers now make the move to become toy licensors. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited. I hope you are too. It's an exciting time to be a toy collector. And I hope you liked this video. If you did, the best way to support this channel, besides subscribing and commenting and et cetera, is sharing this with others on social media. Really appreciate it. It's definitely the best thing you can do. And thank you for watching. I will see you guys in the next video right here on Spectra Creative.